Today's guest is Amy Dunham, Chief Communications Officer of Habitat for Humanity International. Amy, what a pleasure to see you and in such a lovely background. I just can't wait to talk about your work with Habitat. So welcome, welcome, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here.
Great, great, great. Well, look, let's start with some of the essentials here. You've recently leveraged market research to support a brand refresh, and fortunately, that was made possible by a donor gift. But this is in preparation for a new marketing initiative that aims to address the roots of a very well-loved but not always well understood brand. So let's start by discussing the importance of preparing to set a new marketing and communications plan, and then we can outline more about Habitat for Humanity. So over to you.
For sure. So, really excited about this work. We'd only done brand research one time before in our history, which is almost 50 years long, back in 2016. And at that time, we spoke specifically to US small dollar donors with a focus on increasing their individual giving by about $25 per year. So, our brand platform before really focused on that specific audience. Habitat, however, is a global organization. We're in more than 70 countries. And because the housing market has changed a lot in the last few years, so too has our model has evolved to keep up with it. And so talking to not just existing audiences, but potential future audiences was a really important aspect, and really having an eye toward being a global organization to get a sense of how might we need to tailor our messaging in different markets based upon the specific housing dynamics in each region and each country. So that was really what we undertook with this body of work, and we're really excited about what we learned.
Oh, yeah, and we're excited to talk about it. But before we get there, let's discuss how you actually did utilize that market research and those audience insights to shape your whole organizational strategy. So it sounds like it was certainly about changes in the housing market and becoming global. Was there more to it? I'm sure it was so complex.
So we were doing the market research at the same time that we were updating our strategic plan for the entire organization, which at moments felt very ambitious to try to be doing both at the same time. But really, the housing market changed so much in COVID that it was really an important time after things have settled back into the new normal to really take stock of where do we need to be focusing our effort. And so I really took the approach with the market research to represent the audience at the table when we were setting the strategy, because strategy exercises can often be very inward looking, and really focus on the things that you can measure and the things that you know how to do well. So, as we talked about hypotheses and how to take to market all of the things that we need to scale and the hypotheses we want to test, it was important to be able to bring some of those audience perspectives into those conversations. And it changed the outcome of the conversations to bring the audience perspective into the room.
So if you had advice for any marketer, whether they're a for-profit or nonprofit, would you advise that they do two things at once or just really bring the audience in?
I would say that if you have current brand research or find ways to keep it current every couple of years, that should suffice. Trying to do two major initiatives at once is not something I would ever recommend. Life always seems to shake out that way, it seems. I moved 3 months before I got married, so it's kind of a thing in my life where things tend to stack up. But having those insights and having them be current enough for them to carry weight in the room was really helpful.
Do you want to share some of those insights now? Because I know that you've talked a little bit about how Habitat is a well-known but not necessarily well understood nonprofit brand. I mean, do you want to talk about what you found or any surprises? What would you go with?
So I think whenever you're within an organization, you're going to be the closest to it and understand it the best. And it can be easy to lose perspective on what your audience understands. So particularly for my colleagues that are based in the United States, like I am, if you say Habitat for Humanity, people almost to a person will know it. It's very well known. But then once you probe even a little bit, people's understanding of what we do falls off a cliff. They think we give away homes. We've never done that. Every homeowner pays an affordable mortgage. They don't know that we operate internationally. We have from the very outset. So oftentimes in strategy conversations, it's really focused on the ambition of where the organization can be 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. And it's easy to lose sight of where is the conversation about the brand today, because a brand is a conversation between an organization and its stakeholders. And if all you're focused on is your own ambitions, you can start talking about where you want to be in the future in a way that feels really, really separate from where you are today, even if that's not the case. And for a strong brand, it's really important that you're not pivoting. You want to evolve as a brand that is strong. If you're pivoting as a strong brand, you're doing it wrong. So reminding people of where we are and where the current understanding is today and how we bring people on that journey with us was a big part of what I was able to use the audience insights to share.
Well, I think you've just said a number of things that are amazingly profound in terms of evolving and not pivoting, and in terms of describing a brand as a conversation. I mean, so often we hear, a brand is a promise, but I think you're so right about when we live in a social media world where anyone can react. There certainly is a lot of audience perception that shapes that. Um, I think a lot of our audience would be curious also about how you could present that kind of information to senior leadership or to your board or to other key stakeholders, because again, it's another lens. And how do you make all of that understandable and suggest a direction that you think they'll jump on board with?
And I would say in a federated organization, which Habitat is, it's not just my board and my senior leadership team. It's also the affiliates in the United States and all 50 states and Puerto Rico and 70 other countries, each of which has their own independent board. How do you make the case that it's a value proposition to actually lean into the updated brand strategy rather than keep doing what they may have been doing for a long time? Because everybody has kind of their own version of things, and some things that we have sought to retire in the past continue to be out there in the world. But the way that I tried to approach is, when in doubt, put things in threes. So we divided the body of work into 3 phases and then try to distill the key insights from each phase. So the first phase was around discovery, looking inward, but then also looking at our peer set and really trying to distill what were our key learnings from that phase. And then we went into public listening, research more broadly about values and causes before we asked anything about habitat, and then specifically testing messaging about habitat. So I'm sorry, and then that last phase was that message testing. So from discovery to research to message testing, and really bring people along on the journey. I have a board member who always reminds that anytime you're presenting, remind the board where you last left our hero. So bring them along on the journey. Even though I'm living in it every day, they're touching in once a quarter. So take that time in the pre-read to walk them through. So I always have one slide at the start that's got on the right rail, just every step along the journey and reminding them where we are along that journey. So keep them current on it, but really take the time to distill the learnings down, because it can be really easy to get weedy when you're a data nerd like me and excited to have that to share.
No, no, you make a good point. I love the where we last left our hero. I think we could use that in about just about every application we have in all that we do, not only in business. But that no, it that makes it sound simple, and I realize that it is incredibly complex. You've also said something kind of interesting, and I believe it was your step two, just in terms of taking a look sometime, or maybe it was step one, sorry, the discovery period where you also looked at some of your peers. How, I mean, peers, you've got to look at this. I mean, how did you find this initiative has differentiated you in a very crowded and fast changing marketplace?
So as we looked across our peer set, which we established based on fundraising scale, footprint, a number of different elements, What we found is that there's been a real convergence in the language used. So there's been a big trend that's an important one towards conveying not just impact on individual people and telling those stories, but also what is the broader systemic impact of what an organization does. The challenge is that just like kids in high school, kind of cliquish language evolves, and there's terms of art that get used really consistently across the entire sector to the point that it gets very hard to tell who's saying what. So we actually did an exercise where, as we showed it to the board, we took snapshots of different messaging off of homepages of different nonprofits, and we obscured based on the colors and the fonts and the names whose was what, and they couldn't identify who was who. So the fact that Habitat focuses on housing was one of the key differentiators for us. And so that really needs to remain a core part of our story. And so that was really what drove a lot of the messaging, that we need to not shift away, that it's not build and it's describe everything that we do through the lens of building, because that's a broad verb that can be used in a lot of different languages. That's not just the act of hammering nails. You can build a lot of things. You can build a life, community, hope, economic freedom. So that was really the key differentiator for us, is that focus on housing.
No, and words are so important. And I think they get overused, they become buzzwords, they lose their meaning. And I think it is really important to refresh them. You said something when you spoke recently at the ANA nonprofit meeting that I'll never forget. You talked about sometimes you just have to explain what you do in a very short time to someone as if they are a grandmother at a barbecue. And that's nothing against grandmothers, but or an 11-year-old boy at a scouts meeting or something, because I think that if you can't do it, you lose your clarity, and you lose the originality, not only of language, but of the purpose and the thought.
Yeah, it's the old adage, forgive the long letter, I didn't have the time to write a short one.
Oh,
We
yeah,
skip
right.
over, and so that's the joke that I make to my team is that if you need a semicolon, you haven't worked on it enough. So go back and think harder. And that's really something that we've gotten into some bad habits in the nonprofit sector on that front. And so really distilling it down, and it's not what we talk about habitizing things here, and that's become a little bit of a negative term, that's scrubbing it to the point that it's taken all of the technical detail out of it. And so I'm really trying to reframe internally what habitize means, that it needs to be optimistic and ambitious and community oriented and also resonant with general population. And then, of course, we'll get into the technical language for specific audiences. But when people try to make that the language at the very top, we lose so many people at the headline that we're not doing our jobs well.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's not only in the business of nonprofit. It's in all businesses, or it's in the world of technology. Everyone wants to be a scalable, and that it
Right.
becomes a bit of a joke if you just string along all those buzzwords. It could refer to anything, and no one knows what you're talking about. Well, let's talk about something specific, because you're really paving the way for Habitat's new call to action. Do you want to talk about that for a sec?
So our updated brand platform, we actually have two different ways of framing the call to action. One is together we build,
Hmm.
and it ends with a blank space to really capture all of the things that we can work together to build. So this is one that's really valuable for existing stakeholders and people that already are invested in housing as a solution. And it really focuses on the need for partnership and coming together. And we found in this moment, people are looking for entities and opportunities to come together rather than to be forced apart. And the other one is blank starts with the home. And that's kind of more of the foot in the door approach when you're trying to engage with somebody who might not be thinking about housing as a cause. In the US, if you look at the list of the top most trusted nonprofits, almost all of them in the top 10 were number six, I believe, in 2024. Most of the rest of them have to do with pets and children.
Hmm.
And we're the only one that's in housing. And so it's really important for us to stay differentiated. But that also means that there's a lot of other giving entities, both individuals and organizations, they don't actually have housing programs. You can't go, whereas many other institutions will have a children focused or health focused or education focused. And so where you can talk about housing and how it connects to education, that's where the it starts with a home framing is helpful for those engagements.
Yeah, and you do a lot with that because I believe that you do a lot on mortgage education and particularly once someone becomes a habitat owner and so on. So everything connects with something else in many ways. You make it sound so smooth and easy. Are there challenges? I mean, what are the biggest ones?
I think one of the biggest one with market research always is that research should be interpreted and not implemented because people tell you contradictory things. This happens in employee surveys as well. They say they want more accountability, but then they don't want that accountability applying to themselves necessarily. So people say counterintuitive things. And so how do you try to thread the needle? So for example, people see housing as a major issue, but they don't look to charities or nonprofits to solve it. They're looking to governments and they don't have a whole lot of confidence in government. So how do you get people to take a fresh look at something that feels like an intractable problem when they're telling you this couldn't possibly be solved when the people who are supposed to be solving it don't know how to solve it and there's not political will for it. So really trying to interpret it rather than just implement it is a challenge. We also heard different things from the US market as we heard in other places. So where most of our fundraising happens in the US, but we want to raise awareness of our brand and raise our fundraising outside of the United States. Very different dynamic. Affordability, the affordable housing crisis in the US, you don't have to say affordable and anything else in the United States. You have to say affordable and sustainable, affordable and climate. There's different things that you need to say in other places to be resonant, particularly those that have social housing programs from the government. So trying to find a way that we built a big enough tent for it to be a branded house rather than a house of brands. That was the challenge. How do you make it a big enough tent without making it milk toast? Those were points throughout the process that we weren't sure we were going to land it.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to, seeing more. Well, your next step is what? It's a communications plan. So
Yes.
what's the time frame on that?
I'm getting on the road. I'm taking the we are an ecumenical Christian ministry, so we make a lot of references to things that happen in the Bible. So I'm making the joke that I'm taking the Holy Spirit approach. Wherever two or more are gathered, I will be there. So I'm headed to Canada for the Habitat Canada meeting in a couple of weeks. I'm headed to Mexico in a few weeks beyond that. Engaging with our International Strategic Advisory Committee, our U.S. Council, kind of taking the show on the road because particularly as a federated network, having it feel like a value proposition that this is and giving people the tools to actually implement it. So a really good brand guide translated into Spanish and Canadian French as well as English. Good reference materials like PowerPoint templates and really to make it easy and lower the barriers to entry is really important in a federation. So demonstrating that the work is good. And so that's why when we did the research, we oversampled to the point that we can actually answer at a state level in the United States. Here's what consumers say in
Mhm.
Alaska as compared to Arkansas, so that we kind of bring data to the conversation when people have their perspective of what works in their market. We can say, well, here's what the data says. Let's at least have that be part of the conversation.
So do you think you anticipate the challenges of local interpretation of a new global mindset? It's got to be tough. I mean, you're giving them a lot of tools, and it sounds like you're not dictating what they're saying. I mean, how do you manage all that?
So it's a matter of meeting people where they are. I don't expect every affiliate in the United States to be talking about the work that we do to assure women's land rights in Southeast Asia. That's perhaps not relevant to the fundraising that they are doing in their market unless they are a partner with that particular country. So they have the resources, should it be valuable for them to engage. But even if it's telling the story of the work that they do in that community, giving them the tools to do that in that way. So we really focus on if you're trying to say this, here's an updated way to say it based on what the research told us to really try to bring them on that journey of making the case for retiring something that they might have thought worked in the past, really rooting it in the fact that the market is really different. The message of help us build homes for low income people when housing affordability is now affecting more than half of America, it's a different story. We need to be bringing new supporters to the mission in a different way based on that they've had a very different experience with housing than it was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago.
No, you raise a good point, which makes you wonder how often you have to do this kind of perception and audience research. I mean, it's certainly, I guess it's all at, life works at the speed of contemporary culture, so it becomes pretty difficult. Let me ask you something about another buzzword, and certainly both at the ANA and at the Internationalist, we talk about this a fair amount, and I worry that sometimes words get a little bit tired. But that the topic of purpose and of purposeful branding and so on. Do you think purpose still matters today, or is there purpose message fatigue? Or have the messages become a little bit too principled and serious? I mean, I'm just curious. It seems there's a lot of brands that are playing it safe right now, just because they're not sure what to do. And I'm just wondering how you feel about it.
Well, I agree with everything that you've said. I think I think we use the word purpose too much, and I think it's if you talk about purpose without actually describing the purpose, that gets very tiresome to people, and because it feels very like we're performing purpose performance. So for us, really one of the things that we learned in our research is that the ability to participate hands-on is really a differentiator for Habitat and really special. And so that acknowledgement that the housing crisis is a real problem and it's going to be hard work, but we're not afraid of hard work. And we're going to roll up our sleeves and bring people together and find solutions, and we will make mistakes along the way, but we will learn from them and we will share our learnings. That really resonated because our vision is a world where everyone has a decent place to live. And that's tough to argue with. But the invitation to come and participate and be part of a solution and some really concrete action. So the invitation to action rather than an invitation to support is something that we found really resonated in the environment today. But for a
No,
nonprofit, purpose, of course, is core to everything that we do. We talk more about it in terms of mission driven, but the purpose, of course, is that's the translation in our sector.
yeah, and there's lots of ways to say it. I'm always playing with trying to come up with a fresh way to imbue meaning. And you may be right, it may have to be individual, but I love the invitation to action as opposed to the invitation to support. And even a word like support is overdone. Very interesting, very interesting. Well, you have a remarkable background. You've had some extraordinary jobs and experiences. Can you just talk a little bit about that and how they've informed your work now for Habitat?
Goodness. Yeah, I would love to sit here and tell you it was a thoughtful, strategic career path. It's been one much more rooted in curiosity of like, oh, that could sound really interesting. So I've been in organizations that are federated for actually quite a while. That is one of the through lines. So the airline that I worked for early in my career, US Airways, which is now part of American Airlines, was a bunch of smaller airlines that came together all up and down the East Coast and in the Allegheny Mountains. And so there was still kind of some of those cultures being pulled together. Then I went to the US Department of Homeland Security, which was created after 9/11, but brought together a bunch of different organizations that had previously existed, as well as standing up a couple of new ones. So that was 23 different agencies that rolled up as part of that department and coordinating, everything from FEMA to Secret Service to border protection, very, very different missions and trying to bring that together. And then the NCAA is an association of 1,100 different members from coast to coast that are also have affinity to, of course, their own identity and the conference that they're in. So that kind of dynamic of managing a brand in a federated or associated environment, I find a really interesting and unique challenge because it really has to be rooted in making the case of what's in it for me to entities that aren't nearly as invested in that brand as you are as the steward of the brand.
I think that's got to be one of the most difficult things to do because you want to suggest as much as you can based on all of your passion and knowledge and work that you've done. Yet you realize that each individual has to embrace it in their own way. That light bulb has to go on for them, and that hey, maybe your next career has to be some element of diplomacy because to be able to encourage people to do something is not easy.
And it's thankfully, It's something that really fills my cup. I love being able to figure out what will motivate somebody so that I can help bring them along. So the Herman brain dominance model is one that I love, acknowledging that different people make decisions in different ways. So you kind of need to take a walk around the brain. And if they're the more analytical type, what's your argument? If there's somebody who's more moved by a heartfelt story, how do you take it that way? Somebody who's more focused on the vision. So just really taking that walk around the brain. And I think it's good practice for particularly anytime you're briefing a board, everybody knows on their board who are the folks that are going to speak up. And so how do you address those questions ahead of time so it doesn't take you down, you don't go down a rabbit hole in the Q&A portion of the presentation. So I think it's good practice on how to be persuasive.
That's very smart. That's very smart. I'm gonna revisit that, all the elements of the brain. Well, anyway, I would love to talk forever, to be honest with you. And well, maybe not forever, forever. Maybe we need a little bit of sustenance in between, a little food and drink. But anyway, so what's next? What's next for you in Habitat? It sounds like there's a lot of travel on board. It's getting more people on board, more of the groups, the federated teams. What's next?
The next big thing on our list is that it's going to be Habitat's 50th anniversary in 2026. So, which is really exciting for us. So, spending a lot of time now on translating the learnings from this research. And we just updated our strategic plan, as we've talked about as well. And so, really, what's our campaign to grow and deepen support and get people to take a fresh look at us around our anniversary? Of course, anniversaries are most important to the people celebrating them. And so, how do we bring people in a way that isn't just like a look at the timeline? Because that can be a really easy thing to fall into. So, spending a lot of time thinking about what could the activations be that are exciting for different partners. So, I'm really, really excited about that. It's an opportunity for us to really build into the future and use that as the opportunity to get people to take a fresh look at us.
Well, you're right. You do a lot of big things all at once. So obviously, there's something else in your personality and in your career that it's not just the federated part. It's about doing a lot of things with a lot of energy all at once. But, 50 is a milestone. A half century is a great way, not necessarily to look back, but to also look ahead and bring people along who may not know as much about it or may not realize the richness of the history. No, I think that's absolutely great. And I hope you'll keep us posted along the way. It sounds like we're going to have a lot to talk about as we go forward. And I'm very excited myself about learning more about the 50th anniversary and how everything is implemented. So you have been wonderful to share these insights, and I know that they've been useful. I just love how you just automatically give out some great information that's so memorable. Think of threes. Think of that explanation to that grandmother. Evolve, don't pivot. You're amazing. So it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Deborah. I appreciate it.
Really a pleasure, and I look forward to talking with you further.
Absolutely.
The Internationalist focuses on the continual reinvention of marketing by highlighting inspirational marketers around the world and their ideas as they move the industry forward. Internationalist Marketing TV shares these perspectives through interviews and personal stories. Thanks so much for watching. If you find this kind of content helpful, please click like or subscribe. Again, thanks so much.